You're listening to the Elevate Your Call to Service podcast. Here you'll gain tools to lead proactively, conquer overwhelm, and revitalize your law enforcement teams and your agency.
We're your hosts, Michael and Kathy McIntosh. Mike is a retired sheriff and current division chief in the Denver metro area with nearly 40 years of law enforcement experience.
Kathy is a business and branding expert and a longtime law enforcement wife with a unique perspective on the human side of law enforcement.
Together, we share a powerful blend of practical experience and insightful roadmaps to help you elevate your call to service.
Well, welcome back, everyone. We're confronting a problem today that's very common, not just in law enforcement, but this can show up in any team. Infighting among leaders. Sometimes it's a quiet smolder, sometimes a backhanded move. Other times, it becomes very obvious and very loud. This is when leadership silos begin to form. When leaders in police departments or sheriff's offices put their own personal ambition or their unit's goals and status over the organization's shared mission. It tears down collaboration, it starts to erode trust, and it dims an agency's performance in serving the community that really they're there to serve. In practice, especially in law enforcement, it looks like having a my division mindset instead of us solving agency problems together. Or I've seen it when surprise decisions are made that blindside other divisions or other units. Sometimes it's when a leader's identity becomes tied to the box on the org chart rather than the mission and the people that leader is supposed to serve. The bottom line, leadership silos turn partners into competitors. And I think that's eroding our agencies. When we start to turn our partners, our internal partners, into competitors, it slows down our operations and it begins to really erode the public trust that we have.
There was a day a lot of years ago now when you were the head leader in an agency and you drew a line in the sand and you said, this is where we stop saying my unit and start saying our mission. This was the day that the turf wars ended. And I'd like to talk with you a little bit about that. What did you see within the sheriff's office that brought you to that point?
Yeah, I've been fortunate to be a part of some very dynamic teams. And unfortunately, I've also been part of teams that really were kind of, in my terms, dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first times that I really saw the impact of that was when I was a lieutenant, just newly promoted lieutenant, and started participating in some of the command staff meetings. And I can remember those first couple of meetings going in, and we were invited in so that we could learn kind of what was going on at a command level in the organization. And one of the first things that I noticed is the captains that were in that room did not like each other. Mm. And in fact, they didn't like each other so much that you could tell that they hated being in a room together. And they were really focused on one thing, and that was protecting their division or their unit. It was impactful to me because being my first exposure to that, I started to think to myself, I hope this isn't what this is supposed to look like. Mm. That leaders come into the room and really they're siloed and they're really focused on just their division. There was no us there. It was, we would go around the room and it was very individualized. And they would talk about what it is that they needed. And there was even one captain who kind of became known as, and really he wore it as a badge of honor, It was the guy that no matter what question was asked of him, what need was asked of him, the first response out of his mouth was no.
Mm.
Because then he didn't have to sacrifice anything. He didn't have to give anything up. And it was almost like he wanted people to like beg him or bow to him to be able to have him participate in collecting resources, information, and knowledge to be able to help the agency move forward. It was not um, a good room. It was those leaders were not focused on the right things.
There's a unique situation that happens when a new sheriff is elected and you were able to navigate that. And one of the things that you said was you started choosing leaders that were not me oriented. They didn't seem to have the biggest egos in the room, but also they were people who were mission focused and community focused. And that's who you selected for your command staff when you walked into the sheriff's operation. But there were also other things that had to be sacrificed so that you could start tearing down those silos and making sure those silos were demolished for good, not just for, the first couple of weeks of your leadership, but forever. So talk to me about what sacrifices had to be made. What people have to lay down and give up in order to get this mission first and this trusted relationship with one another.
Sure. And as I reflect back to kind of that time in the organization, one of the things happens in this, not real sure how much our listeners know this, but when new sheriffs come in, sometimes they inherit the leaders from the past administration,
Mhm.
and sometimes they bring in new ones.
Mhm.
And it's no different as I watched specifically the two sheriffs before me, how they navigated that. And really it was a great opportunity for me to learn about the things that work well and the things that don't work so well.
Mhm.
And I talked about that one of those first executive meetings that I attended, and really the distrust and the silo building that was in that room. Um, it th- as leaders left, there was intentionality about putting the right leaders back in that room.
As they retired,
Yeah,
they naturally left the organization.
yeah, that
Mhm.
wanted to work together. And I realized at that point that it was critically important to me that the leaders that I selected buy into the mission. And one of the ways that you get them to buy into the mission is they're a part of building the mission.
Mhm.
So that was one of the first things that we did is we got the leaders together and we started to talk about who we want to be going forward. I had an opportunity to talk about that. The person that I chose as the undersheriff had an opportunity to talk about that. And then as others started to join in that, there was so much commonality in there that we were able to build a mission that they could all get behind and all support. I would say the other thing that you really have to be aware of is intentionality.
Mhm.
You have to be very intentional to keep that mission that everybody bought into first and foremost, right? That's always the thing that we're working towards, not the pet projects that each one of those captains or those chiefs might have um, that are running the divisions, but it's how do they support the overall mission of the sheriff's office, and they have to get that commitment by everyone.
For sure.
And if you don't get that commitment, then they're probably not going to be able to function for very long in that role. As the leader of the organization, I would have been looking for somebody else to plug in there if they would not commit to what everybody else is committing to. Quite honestly, at that level of leadership, we all have egos. And that's what makes us good at what it is that we do.
I mean, you can look at it, but you have pride in the work that you do. It's not necessarily I'm an egomaniac, I'm the king of the world kind of stuff, but you've learned over the years to take pride in what you're doing and what you're putting out.
That's exactly right. It's how you deal with the ego that you have that makes good leaders, and it makes those ego-driven, as you said, those ego-driven maniacs. And we see that in all levels of
For sure.
leadership, in corporations,
Celebrity.
in law enforcement, all of us celebrities. Yeah. So when you're building these teams, you have to make sure that you set aside those egos when they come into the room, right? And remember, again, having the mission in front of us, this is our goal. This is what we're driving towards. And then one of the other things that I think is critically important, and so many times we forget it, and you wouldn't think that we would, but so many times we forget who we're serving. And so when you start to see those silos, or when you start to think about what do I need to sacrifice in order to do this well, it's you've got to be intentional about remembering who you serve, remembering the mission, and understanding really how much more we can do together when we serve that common goal.
Mm-hmm. That's so good. What do you think is driving the creation of silos more? Is it leaders who are seeking that control, the credit? Is it striving to look good in front of everybody else? Is it an ego? Is it maybe positioning for the next promotion? What is it that starts to create that breakdown in the infighting that you talked about as we started?
Yeah, I think it's all of those things that you just mentioned. First of all, I think that we have to understand that it's very, very natural that when you leave that room and you go back to your division and you're doing what it is that you need to be doing, it's very natural to be focused on that. And that's your job. That's your role, right? Mm-hmm. Is to be focused on your division and moving your division in the direction that it needs to be going. And you get very, very busy doing those things. We've all got a lot of
doing very good
work to do. Very good things, right?
Right.
Yeah. It can start to creep back. This silo building can start to creep back, and you don't necessarily even know that it's happening. And that's why it was so important that every time we would get back together, it sounds silly, but we would talk about the mission, and we keep the mission in front of us. Mm-hmm. This is why we're here. And we would quickly check the people around the room if it looked like there was a little bit of a deviation. Why is it that it looks like you're starting to kingdom build is kind of what we would call it, with these silos. So, that intentionality that I spoke about, we've got to keep that first and foremost in front of us. It's not uncommon for them to have a vision for their area and start working towards it, and then those blinders start to only move you in that one direction, right? And
sure.
And the higher up in leadership you go, the more you see. The problem is when you start to focus in on something, your focus starts to narrow, and you forget to look wide again. So
that's good. So I think too, and sorry to interrupt you, but I feel like because it comes natural, that means that you have to fight even all the more to keep it calm and to keep that team mindset all the time.
Yeah, we really do, because it's so natural. We have to fight against forming silos, especially in our law enforcement agencies. We have to continually ask, how do we come together as a team and conquer what it is that we need to conquer?
Mm-hmm. As you're talking about that, and as you're saying that it's something that happens naturally, I'm thinking back to when you went to Quantico, you went to the FBI Academy for 10 weeks or 12 weeks or however long it was. It felt like an eternity to me at home. And I developed mad respect for military wives who make a career out of running the household by themselves. But I flew to Washington, D.C. with our daughter to go to your graduation. It was an awesome, wonderful time. But I can remember walking down the street with you, and it was like you had absolutely no awareness that she and I were with you. And it was like you had been in this bubble of all I have to take care of for this amount of weeks is myself. And then all of a sudden we had rejoined you, and there was not this natural flow back into teamwork. Instead, it was, me kind of having to tap you on the shoulder and go, it's not just you anymore. This is how family looks again, remember? And it wasn't because you were intentionally trying to disregard us. And I did feel disrespected. Let's be honest about that. But I knew it wasn't your heart, and I knew it wasn't your intent. And I knew you well enough to know that I could speak into it and you would accept it for what it was, not, me harping on you. But just something as simple as that can just illustrate how natural it is to just really get siloed, even in family structures, even in marriages. It's really not the I that's most important. It's the we that we're striving to protect.
Yeah. And I mean, you're absolutely right. You're at home in Colorado. You're now not only taking care of our two children, you're taking care of the house, you're paying the bills, you're doing, all of those things that we used to do together. And I'm spending 10, 12 weeks where the only person that I have to focus on is me. And you're absolutely right. When you guys got out there, I was still in that silo mode. Right? I was totally in the main mode, and but I love the fact that it's just that quick conversation, and how we were able to redirect that very, very quickly.
It wasn't a fight. It wasn't even a conversation. It was a comment. Like, hey, here we are.
Yeah, and it goes back to where my focus was here, and that's where it needed to be, so that I could accomplish the things that I needed to accomplish. But when we got back together and my focus needed to be wide, it was still here. It was still siloed. So great example.
And it was a really simple course correction. Like you said, it wasn't
right
that had to be dramatic or anything like that. I want to go back to some of the things that you said at the beginning, where one of the things that happens when divisions get siloed, when leaderships really start to look at just their own kingdom, as you said, they start to make decisions that they surprise everyone with, and decisions that they feel like only affects them, but really it affects the entire agency. Can you think of a time in your history where there was a decision like that was made that started causing some disunity, some distrust, some just re-examination of, who's everyone out for here?
Yeah, we had a huge decision, and it was a huge kind of structure change in our organization at the time. We decided that we were going to take on and build an academy, as well as a training facility. And I was totally blessed to be able to be the person that, as the lieutenant, to come up and be the training lieutenant, and be the one that was putting all of those pieces together for the organization. And obviously I had a passion for that. I've always had a passion for training and for development and leadership development. And sometimes you forget that other people don't necessarily share that same thing, right? And I can remember going into that kind of same group of captains, right? And walking into that room, and the sheriff talking about what his vision was. And he had a great vision for where it is that he wanted the agency to go. And as he's talking about that vision, we go back to the no guy. It's like, well, we can't do that, because really doing something like that is agency wide. You can't do that with a 3-person training unit and try to stand all of that up, right? It's going to take instructors from throughout the organization, right? And the no guy immediately is no. I can't commit any resources to that. I can barely get done the job that I need to get done now. And that was kind of the sentiment around the room, especially because these guys didn't like each other and didn't want to help each other in any particular way. So much so that the sheriff had to put the under sheriff as the person that was at the top of the food chain that was
project
running this project. So that's who I reported to, was directly to the undersheriff. And lieutenants didn't necessarily report directly to the undersheriff. That was the captains reported to the undersheriff. But it was one of those times where I was just blown away. You couldn't get group consensus around a concept that would change the organization-wide for good, but these captains were not willing to help and to really buy off on what needed to happen in order to get this done. Now, ultimately, they did. They started to see the value as time went along, and as the undersheriff kept that mission in front of the team, it was something that we were able to accomplish quite well, and it had a huge impact in not just in our organization, but in the law enforcement community, especially on the northern end of the Denver metro area, because we didn't have anything like that up there.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I like to think of it, the term I like to use is mission amnesia, where you get so focused on what you're doing, you really forget about the we part of things. And so it just goes back to something that we've harped on in this podcast, especially for law enforcement teams and police organizations and sheriff's offices, is you have to keep that mission front and center as a leader. And don't feel ridiculous and redundant when you repeat it over and over and over again, because I'm telling you, all it takes is an afternoon or a bad lunch meeting, and you can get that mission amnesia and get back into that me mode and what we're trying to do in our division. So it's really important to keep that, keep the main thing is the way that I want to say it. And when trust starts to break down between leaders, especially at the higher levels like this, tell me, can it be restored? Is there any hope for an agency who's very broken and very siloed?
Yeah, it can, but it's absolutely not easy. I mean, trust is one of the things that takes a long time to establish, to have that on. Mm-hmm. And one incident, one problem can break that trust very, very quickly. And then it's a hard road getting back there, but it can be done, and it can be done if the participants are really bought into it, right? If they really want to repair that trust. And I we talked about that command group, and there were some captains that said, no, we're not going to operate like this anymore. We do need to come together. And how is it that I help and consider the other divisions when they're making their decisions, and not just make decisions in a silo? Because it really, when you think about it, it's not acceptable. It just really is not acceptable to build silos. You have to set those expectations. You have to review the mission, like we've talked about, so that you don't have mission amnesia, and you really have to get on top of it as quickly as you can. And I'll go back just to that little comment that you made about being in Washington D.C., right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about, had you not said something and I continued in that direction, you didn't say anything, you felt disrespected. Well, the same thing happens in the workplace, right?
Yeah.
Somebody's moving forward in a direction. It's like, that was very disrespectful to me. And if I don't say something about that, um, then that trust can start to erode. It can start to fester, and then we start looking at the decisions that person's making. That we think that they're making those decisions with bad intentions, as opposed to when we had developed that trust, we think that their decisions are with good intentions, and there was just a misunderstanding there. So you can see how quickly that happens. So the sooner we can get on top of it and come back together and say, hey, no, this isn't acceptable. There's a better way of doing this. We need to go back to, what is the mission? Why are we here? What is your role in that? What is my role in that? And let's work together to move forward so that we can be better.
Yeah. And I am a strong believer that if you have some disunity on a team, this is where leadership shines. If you have a leader in the room who's willing to not avoid that confrontation, not avoid the conflict, but step into it and call a spade, and get back to, again, what's the main thing? Let's keep the main thing. How do we rebuild that trust? How do we stop assuming the worst about people's intentions? Because maybe you grew up in the agency and you're friends together, or maybe you're new to the agency and you haven't quite proven yourself yet. But how is it that we get to the point to where our intentions are trusted and respected? And when you have that leader who actually leads through that situation, it can make all the difference. It can make or break an entire agency, because a leader refused to just let it keep happening and to keep letting trust erode, and the agency and everything that you've worked to build most of the times your entire career starts to dissolve right beneath your feet. That's what we're all about. So if you have a leader who will just step in and lead, that can make all the difference. We like to say that trust isn't something that just happens. It's a muscle that you have to build again and again and again. And everybody knows the day you stop working out is the day that your muscles start to deteriorate. So you're either working on improving it, or you're just letting it drift out of place.
Yeah.
And that can happen. We can't have that. We also have to keep in mind too that character first, right? We need to be the leader that we want to be known for. We want to continue to build that legacy and be the person that we want people to remember us by. And that's so critical and so important. I'm wondering, as we wrap up our time together, it goes so fast. Yeah. Is there a challenge that you have for our listeners today? Is there something that they can do? This happens, and I was thinking about it as I was prepping. This happens at the chief, the captain level. It also happens at the lieutenant and sergeant level. It can even happen in peer-to-peer teams where one person gets really inflated. So what is it that our listeners can do to recognize that maybe it's happening, to speak into it, and then to start to make some repairs?
Yeah, I think that, from a challenge perspective, and the encouragement that I would give them is, just like you said, there's probably some place within your organization that this is going on, right? And you may have influence over that, and you may not. And it may be in a completely different team, and there's really not a whole lot that you can do about that, unless you know somebody there that you can have that conversation and just say, hey, have you ever thought about kind of leaning into that a little bit. But the biggest thing first is you've got to identify the issue, right?
For sure.
And then once you identify the issue, who are the partners or who are the stakeholders that are involved in that? And then really, they've got to get into the same room again, not to fight, but really to realign and go back to, hey, remember when we set the mission? Remember when we set expectations? Remember, you point back to the mission and you point back to the team.
And the wins. Remember when we did this and this really well thing.
And what we were able to accomplish because of that. Yeah. And then there's always the difficulty of being in a position, and this is happening in the ranks above you. Um,
So destructive.
our aim, our goal, our encouragement would be first that you intervene and get back to building mission first. Trust rich teams by replacing silos with shared identity, transparency, and accountability.
Yeah, it's so good. This was an excellent conversation, I think, and I hope that will help many of our listeners. We're just so glad you're here with us and look forward to our podcast episode.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, everyone.
Ready to build a stronger team, improve your reputation, strengthen officer safety, and recruit top talent? Visit us at leleaders.com and schedule a call with us today. We'd love to discuss how our coaching programs, workshops, and keynote addresses can help you build proactive leaders in a reactive profession.
In the meantime, if you like what you've heard today, we'd love your 5-star review on Apple Podcasts.